Okay, what you gonna do?
And hello fellow tankers, Space Bandit here on another episode of World of Tanks. And today I bring you guest replay, guys. Yes, I got a guest replay for you guys. I had a replay sent in by DestroyerSW. For our sake, let's just call him Destroyer. And it's going to be an unusual replay because I don't really own this tank. And I'm not sure if I'm ever going to grind that line going forward. So I've made a decision to post this replay for you guys. It's a mastery replay of Tier 9 French tank destroyer AMX 50 Foch. Yes, so again with the power creep in World of Tanks and all the new vehicles that are much better, Foch has kind of become a thing of the past. I mean, if you go on the battlefield, you rarely see this tank anymore, just because there are better options out there. And even the Chinese tech tree tank destroyers that just came out recently are much better than French tank destroyer lines. So Foch has suffered significantly over time because of the power creep. It's not as popular tank to play anymore. People know where to penetrate this tank. It's not really that hard to penetrate, again because of the power creep. And the biggest disadvantage of this tank is that big radar thingy on top of its structure. It looks like a cupola, but it's really a radar. But just to give you a quick idea of the tank and its stats. So the DPM of this tank is not the greatest. We're looking at about 2400 DPM. For instance, comparing it to its Chinese counterpart WZ120 GFT, its rate of fire is 2944 DPM. So quite significant drop off for Foch. Also, the penetration values on standard ammo for this tank are not the greatest. We're talking 257 millimeters of standard penetration at tier 9, which is not really that great when you think about it. You gotta be facing tanks at tier 10. For instance, his Chinese counterpart has penetration values of 271 millimeters on standard shells. So quite significant difference there. Also, damage per shot is better on a Chinese tank destroyer than it is on Foch. We're talking about 400 damage per shot. So yeah, you can get around with this tank, and I'm sure there are people out there that love this tank. I haven't personally have any experience with it. I haven't played it. I've started grinding this line at some point, but I've stopped at tier 8 tank destroyer and I didn't like it at all, so I basically decided not to go forward and continue grinding this line. Now, with respect to the gun, I think the gun accuracy is pretty reasonable. Aim time is 2.4 seconds, dispersion 0.34, so gun stats are relatively good, but you're probably gonna have to find yourself firing a lot of premium shells, especially if you drone, tier 9, tier 10 games, so that's kind of disappointing. View range suffers a bit as well. For instance, its Chinese counterpart at tier 9 has 390 meters of view range, yet Foch has only 380 meters of view range. So, meh. I don't know if I would really recommend this tank to anybody. I mean, if you're an experienced player and you're looking for a challenge, I would assume this tank would give you a little bit of a challenge from playstyle perspective. But other than that, I don't see any benefit really grinding this line. It seems like Destroyer has some knowledge with respect to how to play this tank. So maybe he can give us a few pointers in the description section below, and maybe he can describe his experiences with this tank. I don't know, maybe someday I would be interested to going back to this line and maybe grinding it. I mean, one thing that I see, if this tank can give me similar gameplay to Yak Panther 2 in the tier 8 German tech tree, if it plays sort of similar to that, I might be interested, because Yak Panther 2 is one of my favorite tank destroyers in the game. So this tank does have mobility and it does have good gun handling stats, so maybe there's some good in it as well. Maybe there is a way to master it, and maybe Destroyer can show us how. So let's switch back to the game. So from gameplay right now, it seems like this tank is fairly nimble. It actually rotates pretty quickly. If you've seen earlier in the game, the light tank was trying to get around Destroyer, but he was able to actually turn very quickly. I'm not sure what kind of cruise skills he's got in this tank. I don't know if he's got clutch braking, but if he doesn't, this tank seems to be turning pretty well. He was also able to dispose of E100, but I'm really surprised because E100 should easily be able to penetrate Foch. I'm not sure what that guy was doing over there. So he bounced a couple of shots. Good for him. Then his team seemed to cleared out this side and they took care of the T110E4 that was left alone at the end there. Now, as you can see, Destroyer is displaying proudly its 4-year service badge. Yes, he's got a 4-year badge on the tank. That means he's been in the game for a long time. Another thing that tells me that he's one of the original players is the use of compass. I mean, you see in the bottom right-hand corner, he's using a compass instead of the mini-map. So I remember myself a long time ago using compass all the time. And that was the only thing I would do, and I would switch in between compass and big map. And a lot of older players still seem to be doing that. Over time, I've adopted a small map into my repertoire, if you want to call it that, because it lets you react to the situation much quicker. And you have a much more extended view range. Yet I do switch to compass every once in a while in a close quarter fighting. It's beneficial. It's beneficial because on the small map, it is really hard to see from which direction the enemy is coming, and sometimes I get confused looking at the minimap if the enemy is coming from left side, is coming from right side, if it's behind me, where exactly is he. So if you switch to compass, you immediately will have an idea where your enemy is. So I do find it beneficial switching back and forth. So here, end stages of the game, I think this game should be easily won right now. So you can see Destroyer getting in here, taking out another T110E4. Now he's being very patient in this game, so he's not really rushing forward. He took 2 big shots, and I think both of the shots that he took were from T110E4s, from a previous one before and from this one here. So now he's playing very smartly. He's just waiting for M48 Patton to fire, and once he fires, he basically pulls out and takes a shot. Again, I'm really impressed with mobility of this tank, especially the turning ability, which is quite good, it seems. So Destroyer has 10 shots of penetration currently with 2 kills. He's got some assisted damage and a lot of track damage. And that's the bullshit part about this game lately. I mean, he was shooting at a light tank twice, I think, and he basically all he has drawn was critical, and he was also shooting T110E4 in between the tracks, and he's also only drawn a critical. So yeah, this game has been doing this a lot lately, a lot, and those are one of the things that really pee me off. I wonder if it pisses you off as well, guys, especially if you have a point-blank shot at the side of the tank. You shoot between the tracks and you draw a critical, and you're like, really, game? So it seemed like game was easily won. You could see there was, like, they had significant advantage with respect to how many tanks were left over. All of a sudden, there are only 3 tanks left on Destroyer's team. One is an AFK T110E5, I believe, and they still have a full health T110E5 on the opposite team. So it's basically him with 11 HP left and a Jagdpanzer E100. But it seems like this T110E5 player is not the greatest. He exposed the full side of his tank, and the Jagdpanzer E100 takes a big chunk of his health just with 1 shot. Now that thing can roll up to 1000 HP, actually over 1000 HP, I believe. That's another thing I don't have. Maybe at some point I will get to it, but I'm not in real rush. I just don't like playing slow tanks, guys. So Destroyer is doing the right thing here. He's basically tagging behind the Jagdpanzer E100, and that's a sign of an experienced player, because basically he's letting his higher health tank forward and he basically covers behind them. He doesn't want to get shot and die, because 2 guns is better than 1, obviously. And if for whatever reason T110E5 would actually round the Jagdpanzer E100, that game may as well be lost. So it's still a relatively close game. He has to be really careful here how he approaches the E5. But it seems like E5 decided to run off, which is another strange thing. I mean, guys, if you play E5, you're supposed to be a bully at tier 10. Attack. Don't fall back. Don't hide. Side scrape. use the tank to its advantages, to its strength, and play the game. Engage. Don't run away with your E5, and don't load HE into your E5, okay? Just use your standard AP shells, because they're great, and it's a great tank. Anyway, great game by Destroyer. He has really shown his wisdom in this game. He played the game smart. He took only shots when he had to. Now let's take a look at the post-game stats. So he's managed to put up 4.5k damage, 1.5k assisted damage, which brings the total to 6k combined damage with 1390 blocked, which is quite surprising. And obviously a mastery badge, because he was a bottom tier in a heavily armored tier 10 game. He still managed to make 38,000 credits. He has fired 19 shots with 17 direct hits and 12 penetrations. Pretty decent game by Destroyer with base XP total of 1979, which is pretty darn good. Again, thank you Destroyer for sending me this replay and letting me show this tank off and its abilities. I hope this video was educational for you guys. I hope you get a little bit of information with respect to how to play this tank. I hope Destroyer can give us a little bit more in the description section below as to his setup, consumables, his loadout, his screw skills, so on and so forth, so that we can get an idea how to set this tank up for its optimal performance. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Shoutouts to CloneGuy72 and Got a Dinghy. Links to their channels will be in the description section below. So I encourage you guys, go and check out their channels. They have some great content. Until next time, happy tanking, Space Bandit, checking out.
What you gonna do?